All right, so I am doing this as an impromptu video. I apologize for the squeaky chair. This computer chair is really old, and I do need to get it replaced. But anyway, I'm doing this impromptu, sort of like an intro video to the tutorials that I started, and my internet connection was real choppy. So the Zoom just kept stopping, and when I was recording it, it would stop, and a couple of moments later it would bounce back, and I would just continue the recording. Well, towards the end, which is like an hour and a half, it got choppy, and the break between connections was too long, so it just ended abruptly. So I wanted to add this brief intro on just to let people know that first and foremost, I thank you for supporting me. What I'm doing here is I'm starting a series of tutorials in a more organized fashion rather than being willy-nilly. I had a conversation with a couple of friends and people close to me who emphasize and stress that I need to put more tutorials out there. And so I'm doing that. What I'm doing is creating a series that's going to touch on anatomy, lighting, figure construction, color theory, line work. And so this first video is touching on line work. I get more into detail with that. What I'm going to do is chop it up and release a shorter version on YouTube. And for those who would like to support me on Buy Me a Coffee, the link is posted below. I will give them access to the full video and all of the tutorials. And I'll continue to put out shorter tutorials on YouTube as things come to mind, and as I learn new and exciting tricks and tips. Yeah, I'll do long form stuff on Buy Me a Coffee, possibly Patreon, membership options on YouTube, potentially. I don't even think I can do any of that stuff because I'm such a newbie on YouTube, but definitely on Buy Me a Coffee. So I just wanted to do this intro just to let you know the first video it ends abruptly. So yeah, and just give you an idea of what's to come. Feel free to share, like, as a buddy of mine, a dear woke Christian, you should check out his YouTube channel as well. He likes to say, give the 3-piece special, a like, a comment, and a share. So I am going to follow in kind and ask for the same thing. All right, so this is illustration of a character that I've done. Now this is, you see the line work here, but you also see that this character is fully rendered, right? There's lighting and shadow. There's reflected light over here from the sky. There's light along this side of the character from the setting sun. The light shooting from the sun down in this area, right? I'll blow this up a little bit. Okay, so in terms of line work, this is an example of where you can take it. But before you get to this point, you have to understand how to use your lines, right? Because really, how you use your lines is extremely important. There's some examples here where, for example, the line along the top of the arm is thinner than certain areas, and there's better examples than this, but deeper in this part of the body, this line is going to be furthest away from the light, so you're going to want to make this mark thicker than the line that is fully in the light, right? That's just one trick. And if you don't understand that, when you go to render your artwork, if you want to do a design something like this, it can come off as less interesting, right? But you can also choose to do something flat like this. And here, this is more of of, this is actually a character design that I did for one of my animations, The Little Boy in the Shadow. The story is about a father and his son discovering his shadow. And so here, the line work is pretty even, but this serves as a character model, right? But even here, you can vary the line where it's thicker in some portions and then it thins up in other portions. You want to do this because that variation in the line, it makes it interesting, and that's before you get to the point to where you're adding all of these colors, right? It's before you get to this part where you're rendering a sky with clouds and a sunset and light and shadow and whatnot. Before you get to this point, you have to be able to use a line so that right here, you want to be able to use the line in a way that you can describe what exactly you want to communicate to the audience, right? Color, value, light and shadow, these things can help, but it starts with line work. Now I am an illustrator. Well, I am a drawer. I like using line work, right? When I do paintings, I start the process with drawing. I do a very detailed line drawing. I have figure drawing background where you're drawing or you're rendering someone with pencil, and you take it from a black and white drawing to a fully rendered drawing. And a render just simply means a drawing that looks three-dimensional, like you see a drawing of someone's bicep that would be fully rendered in light and shadow. Would probably help if I could pull up some examples. Let me find some examples. So this rendering of a skeleton is a charcoal drawing on gray paper, right? Now they're using line here, but this is a fully rendered drawing, right? You've got clear areas of light, clear areas of shadow, even within the form. You see a lot of change in form going on here, right? But before you get to this point, it's just simply a line drawing. It's important to start with line work so that when you understand the power of a single line, then you can really begin to communicate the way you want to in your art. All right, but there's actually a few things that you can indicate pretty well with just a simple line that can go on to become a really good foundation for starting your drawing. So the better you become at the use of a line, the better off you'll be. And this is whether you're painting or drawing. And with me, I have a figure drawing background, so I would do a line drawing in pencil, and then I would go and I would render it. Let me see. This is right. So this is more of how I'm used to starting my portraits that become fully rendered. Fully rendered, like say something like this. Okay. You can even see the line work along here. Right, these are actually very wonderful lines. So the power of a line is underestimated, or can be, when you're starting out early in your art career. And I would say, it's easy to forget, even for people who are older. I know for me personally, I tend to study a lot, and it's like the more information I take in, the more other stuff falls out of my head. And so I have to constantly review notes and whatnot. And so You know, it's just an idea of what you can do with line work. So one of the things that I recommend, uh, line exercises. First, what I like to do is kind of draw a grid. And again, you can poo-poo on this if you find there's another method that's more helpful for you. This is a method that I picked up from an architectural illustration book. Architectural illustration is actually one of the types of art that I like to do. Um, you know, you do a pencil underdrawing, and then you finish the rendering in ink. You can do it in ink, or you can do it in watercolors, gouache, oil paintings, whatever your cup of tea is. But um, using line to describe architectural detail is it's pretty fun once you can get a handle on it. But this is so the book that I got this from is a really good book on ink drawing. There's quite a few books, and I'll be happy to share those resources for people who are interested. So here we go. You don't have to do this many boxes, but this is what I tend to do, just to vary the line. So you want to practice straight lines evenly, and you can do this whether you have a digital. I'm using a digital tablet, Wacom tablet, and I have an iMac, so this Wacom tablet is set up as a second monitor, and I'm just using Photoshop and the pen with this tablet. And excuse me, let me turn this off. I'm using the stylus pen with Photoshop on a tablet, and but you can just use pencil and paper and just follow along. Right. So what I'm doing here are the line exercises. So whether you're right-handed or left-handed, where you start and end the line will depend on which hand you draw with, right? So for me, being left-handed, I tend to start on the left side and drag to, or I'm sorry, the right side and drag to the left, and it would be the opposite if you're right-handed. So that's for this this box right here. So if you're left-handed, start right and go left. And if you are right-handed, you'll just start left and go right. Same over here. If you're left-handed, you'll start right, go left. If you're right-handed, same thing. Don't really think it matters on this box. And so this is typically what I'll do. I'll just come in and I'll just go straight up and down, or I might go up one line, down one line, like this, if you can see my cursor. Same thing here. And just to make it tough on myself, I will sometimes go right, even though I wouldn't do that on an actual portrait that I'm working on. And I just, you know, do a series of straight lines. Here I'm left-handed, starting on the right, going left, and you know, might do that. Okay, next I will do a wavy line, and I'll start in I'll half the box. So I'll do the first wavy line, cutting the box in half, and then I will do another wavy line to cut the box in the quarters. And then I'll go and then I'll just continue filling in these gaps in between each line. And you want to do this because, for one, I am trying to mimic the line that's in between. I'm trying to mimic that squiggle, and I am also trying to keep my hand steady enough and keep the space even in between the lines. right? And I'll show you why you want to do these exercises. So then I'll do the same thing with squiggly lines. It's kind of like this. Boom, 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 and of course getting a little lazy just so I can get through this part and jump to the next section. All right, so squiggly lines. Also, feel free to skip through this part if you think you're good to go. And I will try to add timeline marks. I will try to add timeline marks for you're being recorded right now. Or I will try to add timeline marks for people who are need to skip ahead. All right, so I'll do that with squiggly marks, and then I will do jagged lines like this. Same thing, all the way across. Jagged lines up and down, jagged lines across, jagged lines diagonal. Okay, now you can vary it if you want. You can do, you know, however you want like that. All right. Next, I would do sort of what would you call that? A clover leaf shape. And then I would just keep on expanding out on it. Just like that. Just like that. Until I fill up the box. And then I would do a similar thing where I kind of make a star, and then I'll just expand out, and just keep on building on it like that until I fill up the box. Another is actual stars, star patterns. But what I'm doing here with these marks is actually creating lines that could mimic foliage, right? Trees and bushes and shrubs that you would see, and an architectural illustration. So an architectural illustrator, someone who's going to take the plans of a foundation, and they're actually going to do the perspective drawing and render it, and do a rendered drawing of what the foundation of the building will look like and all of its splendor once it's built, with with a lawn and trees and landscaping and the background and whatnot. And they'll probably, they'll do a pencil drawing and then come back and render over top of it with ink. As a matter of fact, let me just show you an example, because they are absolutely beautiful drawings. Okay, so here we have an example of classic ink drawing. This is actually from the magazine, or not the magazine, the book, How Pen and Ink, Rendering in Pen and Ink by Arthur Guptill. This is one of the illustrations in the book, and if you now see the resolution on this picture is pretty low, but if you notice, when you're looking at the foliage over here, the lines are not really that much different than what you see right here, these squiggly lines, right? So the practicing of these lines all have a purpose. Essentially, you can put together, if you look at these lines, they're not perfectly straight. None of these lines are, right? And this is a fully rendered ink drawing of a brick home. And you can get in. We're going to get into the lighting and shading of, and the value and whatnot, the value studies down the road. But for now, I just want to point out how powerful a simple line can be if you understand that you have many different types of lines. You have a straight line, you've got squiggly lines, sharper lines, you know, these I don't know, bubbly, fluffy, fluffy lines. There's many different, you know, I guess I'm struggling here with terminology, but you see it, you get it, and eventually these lines can actually be organized and put together to construct a very competent and very beautiful rendering, right? Whether it's a line drawing or whether it is dun dun dun. I'm gonna throw a curveball in here. This is pre-production artwork of Tarzan for Disney's Tarzan, brought to you by the director and the animator extraordinaire Glenn Keane. Um, Straight and curvy lines here, right? They could be rough sketches, or they could be more detailed in nature. I grabbed this picture here. I thought it would be better resolution. Okay, but I'm gonna move on. So that's essentially what I would be doing with the line exercises, and then of course, um, here's something else I would do. I would just draw a curvy line, kind of like a bullseye on a target. Slowly and steady. And it's okay if it is not perfect. It is okay if it is not perfect. It's practice. All right? And then sort of a pinwheel shape. Try not to let the line cross over with the pinwheels. And the most important part is varying lines. Right? So you could do one line where you start thin and then you press it till it's thick. Let me get a fatter. So you start thin and you press it till it's thick. This kind of mimics a brush, an ink brush, or a pen and nib, which I guess I might as well show you these things just to give you a better idea of what tools are used to make your marks. All right, so here you've got the pen nib, which is the edge that's dipped in the ink. Here you have the nib with the quill. The quill is the handle. Usually these are used for writing, for calligraphy work, and also drawing. You have that, and then you have an ink brush. Right, so these ends are very flexible. Here's a good example right here, the types of marks you can get. Right, really thin, and then it thickens up. So that would mark kind of like this, would simulate an ink brush. And you could create a box like this and just do a series of these types of lines where you could start fat and then thin up like that, and then on the next lines start fat, thin up like so. You could also go, instead of doing just a straight line, do it like this the first time around. Now this is whether you want to do ink or watercolor or acrylic. I don't oil paint. I have very limited experience with oil painting. Never went follow through with it. Was just too turned off by the risk of, you know, cancer and whatnot. And plenty of artists do it just fine, but you know, I'm not the most I tend to be a little messy with my art supplies. Gouache, the good quality gouache that I use, which is like a thicker watercolor. Some of that, the good, great, better grade stuff. The colors like cadmium red, cadmium yellow, cadmium orange. They actually have cancer-causing agents in them, so I have slowly worked my way to that. Eventually, I'll probably get more into oil paintings, but anyway, as far as making a mark, you're not just limited to ink. Drawing a line is not just limited to pencil and ink. A line is a line, period. Right? So you can vary these lines with thickness, however you want, and it's really just an exercise on dexterity. It is an exercise on how skillful you can get with the tool, right? And the more skillful you can be with the line, the more creative you can be with your art. And let me show you why. So, first of all, this kind of jumps into light and shadow, right? So, you can render a line drawing. You can describe light and shadow of an object. Let's take a rectangle, for example, with just line, right? Let's say we have the sun over here, right? And there's the horizon. All right, so we're on, there's some land there and some mountains back here. It's nothing but a line drawing, right? Okay, now, we don't need to worry about shadows, actually drawing in the shadows. What we can do is we can just determine with the line drawing which part is the furthest away from the light. Now, I can't help myself. I am going to show a little trick. All right, so an idea on how to draw shadows. You take your light source. In this case, it's the sun. What you have here is a perspective line, right? And the perspective line will determine how you draw your object. So now I've got to go and redraw this thing since I'm kind of jumping into perspective. So I'm going to draw a box using these perspective lines, like so. All right, kind of a funky box, but it'll work for now. Okay, now you want to create drop a line from your light source, and where it meets this is called the vanishing point on the horizon line. And we'll get more into this down the road in perspective. This light source will drop down to here, and this will tell us how to draw the shadow on the ground. From the middle of the light source, you're going to have your light rays traveling out, and these are going to tell us where to locate the shadow on the ground. Now, it's not exact. It's just you're pinpointing, right? I got to get used to my camera up here. You're just pinpointing. So the simplest thing to do is just to take the light rays and touch the corners of this object that you've drawn. Right? There's a corner here. This front corner back here will land right there. I'm actually going to do make the light rays yellow. Hopefully, hoping you guys can keep up with this. You can follow along. All right. So light ray that touches this corner, corner 1, corner 2, and the front corner, corner 3. right? And so this is corner 3 back here. Way back here is, I'm going to say, way back here is corner 2, and then way back there is corner 1. Then you're going to take, off of this ground plane, you're going to draw this line back like that. You're going to go and find where this light ray hits the ground, plot a point down, go and find it where it hits the ground, back further, and you're going to kind of do a little something like that, right? And then you're going to hit the bottom of the other side of the box and bring it back like that, and just fill in the shadow. Right, so that is how we would spot or locate our shadow if we were wanting to add color and, you know, light and shadow to the scene, right? Based off of this light source back here. Right, now it's a little sloppy, but hopefully you guys get the point. But before we even get to that point, in order to indicate this with just line work alone, remember I was talking about varying the line. That's actually something that you can do here to indicate this box is in shadow. Same with this line. Now these are very gross examples, but I'm exaggerating them just to get the point across. All right? Maybe it would be thicker towards the bottom and thinner as it reaches the top. And you can even, like at the corners, oh, there we go. The corners, you can even erase part of the line just to indicate that, you know, it's maybe a highlight. And so this may make some sense. Hopefully it does. Let me do another example. Let me do a circle, right? And the same, it's being impacted by the same scenario. So if we had light rays, the light rays would be touching this side, coming back right here. Light rays come down, touching this side, coming back right here. The perspective, since this is a circle, it would be a little trickier. But I'm saying trickier. I'm in Kentucky, but I don't have that much of an accent, I don't think. Right. All right, so it would be something like this. Shadows are rarely black. So I'm going to make this gray. Be something like that, right? And then, of course, you're going to actually shade the object. But with just the line work, we can indicate that by thickening the line down here. Okay. This is one of those lessons where you don't really get the complete understanding but I'm trying to touch on it a little bit for those who may be curious as to how exactly this translates to drawing something that looks 3D. Um, the reason we do this is because I'm trying to smooth this out right here, right? And then at the top, where you might have a highlight, you're going to kind of just break up the line a little bit. The reason you do this is because if we're looking at this object, all right, let me start another layer, turn this off. All right, so if we're looking at this object from the side, let's say there is your light source is over here. Your light rays are going this way. This is what's going on. We want to indicate with a line. So there's many different forms of light, right? Okay, I kind of have to get into this. All right. So there's many different forms of light. Let me just draw this first. Not many, but just you've got many transitions from light to dark. Okay, you have your highlight, your light, your halftone, I'll just go ahead and say it, Terminator. It's getting a little advanced, but I'll try to keep it simple. Your core shadow, also known as the form shadow, your reflected light, your occlusion shadow, and then your cast shadow. And sometimes some people will add highlight, center light, halftone, terminator. Some folks say the center light and the light's the same. I like simplification. So generally you have occlusion shadow, 8 transitions from light to shadow. Okay, 4 are in the light, and then the other 4 are in shadow. And what that looks like is something like this. I'm going to paint this whole thing gray. Come here on the top of it. And I'm going to start with the shadow form. Okay, so I'm going to fatten shadow. It's going to be a very crude breakdown, but you all will get the point. Okay. All right. So just to give you an understanding of what I'm doing here, the gray is functioning as the halftone. This darker gray is functioning as the shadow, overall shadow, but I'm not going to touch on all of these. I'm just going to hit, let's see, I'm going to hit the highlight, the light, the halftone, and let me see. And then I'm just going to keep all the shadow grouped together. I'll do reflected light. Yeah, I'll do reflected light. And obviously the cast shadow. Okay, so for the light, get in here and pick lighter than the gray. Okay, and then for the highlight is usually a small spot on the object that's reflecting the light, and it's usually the part of the object that's being the side of the object that is perpendicular to the light source. All right, so did I make this right? So in this case, I'm picturing the light source is coming from yonder, traveling out kind of like this. So it's not an exact, it's nothing exact. It's just here to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. And then I'm going to do this. I'm going to cut the shadow a bit. I'm going to light the ground. What's wrong? What's wrong? No, I'm recording. What's wrong? I'll check it out. Okay, so next I'm going to, oh, I gotta turn my fade style on. Turn on my fade style. Okay. Rendering right here. This is actually, if you are working with paints, acrylics, gouache, oil painting, I don't know. I don't use watercolor that much. I don't know. I think you can get this effect with watercolor, but it's not exactly gonna operate the way that I'm using it here. But this is pretty much the method for painting something in light and shadow. When you are painting it, you basically want to break it down. Even though you have all of these transitions from light to dark, you always want to break it down to no more than 3 to 4. So, uh, yeah. And if you end up using more than 3 to 4, you want to organize the lights so that only 3 to 4 dominate, even though you may have more variation. And again, that's stuff that I'll get into. I'll get into down the road. All right, so we've got our highlights. Our highlights are always going to be small, like that. Our lights. We've got our half tone. Probably be more light down here. And because of this reflected light back here, I am going to, yeah, actually, here's what I'm going to do. Take this, I'm going to cover this back up. I'm about to wrap up this lesson. Sorry I made this so long, guys, but I don't know. I feel like I'm working on trying to make these more digestible. But you know, sometimes this stuff is just not. It's not fast food. You know, it's a sit-in restaurant, and you don't get the results. You don't come by the results quickly. You know, I didn't come by this stuff quickly. It took years for me to come to understand this. And if you guys could just bear with me and be patient, I will try to organize and condense those years into these lessons, one series at a time. So that you walk away with from each episode, from each video, each lesson with something that you can instantly apply. Right? So I'm gonna pick the shadow, and then here's the halftone. Right? Now the thing about the reflected light, which I'm about to add, is the reflected light always has to be lighter than the shadow. Right? So there might be some reflected light coming over here from this side that's lit. It has to be lighter than the shadow, but darker than the darkest part in the light, which is the halftone. It can get a little confusing, I know, but and then down here, where the object touches the ground, is where you're going to have the deepest shadow. It's called the Occlusion Shadow. But basically, when you're organizing this stuff, when they're doing production art, background art for animations, storyboard designs, video games, they usually just limit this stuff to, or limit the transitions from light to shadow to 4 transitions. Makes it more organized, makes it more pleasing to the eye, and makes it quicker to be rendered. Lets you work faster. All right, and so the thing with this ball here is it gets a little tricky. Okay, here we go. We're back. Okay. We are back. We are back. We are back. All right, so reflected light. It's going to throw in a little bit of reflected light down here. Okay. Now, this is a very crude. Flip it. It's a very crude rendering. This is a rendering of a circle into a sphere, right? But very crude one, but a rendering nonetheless. Okay. So now I can't stop. Can't stop. Look at me. I gotta perfect it. That's an Achilles heel to an artist. Gotta perfect it. We should get over that, by the way, as soon as possible, because when someone's paying you to do a job, they don't care if it's pretty. They just want to make sure that it looks good. It doesn't have to be perfect. We tend to want to make things perfect, and they honestly can't tell the difference between pretty decent and perfect. It's a huge difference for artists. We can see all of that, but the client, people, fans from the outside looking in, they can't tell the difference between in some cases decent to great, for the most part. But that doesn't mean that we should try to slack on the work. I wouldn't say decent to great. I would say good and great. But anyways, so to turn the background off. Let me turn the background off and do that. No, I'm gonna keep it here. I'm gonna keep it here. I'm just gonna shrink it. All right. So to render this ball, using this as an example, how we indicate light and shadow with just a line is I'm gonna roughen the ball. Ball here. Okay. Turn my transfer off. Taking the transfer off makes it work more like an ink pen. With the transfer on, it works more like a pencil or pastel, like soft art medium. Okay, and what I'm gonna do here is this is how I would render it. Never mind the reflected light with the line, because with the line you want to be you want to make a clear statement. And if you try to worry about the reflected light, it could be too convoluted and confusing, and it would lose the point that you're trying to make, which is probably the biggest point that I should have said from the beginning. Whatever we draw, it is to make a statement. Okay. So again, a very crude example, but that is essentially what we're doing with the line, right? And then, of course, you would have your shadow back here as an ink drawing. Okay, and you can just kind of go and tailor it up, take that out. Clean it up a little bit. That's the difference. You just kind of look back and forth, right? And when I think about it, this is do this a little better. Let's do that. Yeah. So when you want to render this in black and white, this is how you do it with a line. Okay, so if we're say we're doing some hedges, say we're doing some bushes, right? Do this. Say we're doing some rectangular style hedges. Light source is still coming from over here. Same light as what we see on the bulb, right? So I am going to take the marks that I was practicing, make my bushes. Now I'm trying to show form using these lines. See how I'm changing the direction of these marks? I would also recommend looking at a picture and not copying the picture. And I'll get into that at some point to kind of help with how to maneuver your way around drawing something like this. I'm just doing this for memory and a little bit of memory, a little bit of imagination. All right, and so I want to blow this up so like the other stuff is distracting. All right, so if I am going to render this just with the line work, no tone, no shading, I'm going to make everything, I'm going to try to reflect that as much as possible. See these little marks here, when I'm doing this is a simulation for a branch. Right? A branch with leaves coming off of it. Some of you may have be saying duh as I'm doing this, but you know, the the simple cannot be overstated. That's the thing that I've learned. Um, the further I dig into this art thing, into the studies, the more that I see simple, very simple principles. And the difference between the masters, um, I'll go ahead and use Star Wars, Star Wars lingo. The difference between like the Jedi's, the Jedi Masters, the Jedi Knights, and the Padawans. Other words, the like the legends, masters, professionals, I would say teachers. Some of these can be the same. Students. The difference is, um, I would say, the amount of knowledge that can help. I think I just spelled knowledge wrong. Yeah, I definitely spelled knowledge wrong. I should act like I went to college at least. Not that a college degree makes you smarter than anybody, but um, I should definitely show that I didn't waste my college money, my parents' college money, by at least spelling words right. So the amount of knowledge and mastery, this is probably the biggest in my opinion, mastery of the fundamentals. The simple is is the masters can do the simple stuff in their sleep. And when you can do the simple in your sleep, you move faster. But it's not about speed. Speed comes. It's about knowledge, right? So I am actually coming and putting, you know, darker marks on the sides of the leaf that would be in shadow if the light source is over here, right? And then that's what I'm doing over here, right? So if I see a leaf, thing of leaves up here, then you know, how do I show? How do this is kind of complex, so I think this is a better example. But you know, you got to figure out how do I show um, form in here with just the line, right? And the more you practice lines like this, the more you study from life. So you look at hedges, and you look at artists who draw with ink, or who paint with oil, or who paint with acrylic, or whatever medium you choose to use. You look at how they problem solve. You study their work, right? But for the sake of this tutorial, this is what I would do just to keep it simple. Everything that's on the bottom, I would thicken up the bottom part of the line and just kind of go along like that, right? And what you will see is there's a line and here's a line. One is more interesting than the other. Why? Because this only does this, where this line does this. In terms of action, this line goes straight. This line goes up and bends, comes back and continues. And so what that means is, from a storytelling standpoint, this is more interesting. I know it's kind of weird, but that's sort of how it works. I know I could explain it better in other tutorials. I will, but just understand that this line is more interesting for aesthetic reasons, and that's pretty much it. Just to review, before you do any kind of work, get in here and practice your lines, do your diagonals. You can create varying shapes of your own if you like, or you can just practice the ones that I'm doing here. Do some foliage marks. You can come and do a little bit of, add a little dimension to the forms, you know. And then when you go to draw something like trees, I call these Dr. Seuss leaves, by the way, but it works. You can just simply, you know, these are the leaves. I'm just thickening the bottom part of that line because this is the shape that I'm creating, and this is the part that's in shadow, and this is the part that's in light. So wherever you are as far as your skill set in drawing, if you can only draw, these are Ninja Turtles that I used to draw when I was little. If you can only draw this as a Ninja Turtle, cool. Start adding dimension to it. The bottom of his bandana, start adding dimension to it. All right, if you can draw a foot, start adding dimension to it. All right, and I didn't always know how to draw a foot just straight off the cusp like this, willy-nilly. I would have to do an underdrawing, and I would have to work so hard at that underdrawing, but I get here because I understand a very simple thing about shape. And I've drawn a lot of feet. So again, it's observation, it's experience, right? And actually, when you're coloring, when you're adding a thicker line, you know, you can kind of do that